Prologue. Kang Si-won had attended more gallery openings than he could count, and cared about fewer still. They were obligations, dressed as culture. His name on a donor wall, his face in a photograph, his presence used as proof that the Kang family still cared about the things that mattered. He arrived. He stayed the correct amount of time. He left. That was the arrangement. The National Museum of Korea on a Tuesday morning was different. No event, no photographer. No one needing anything from him. He came alone, the way he sometimes did when the noise of being Kang Si-won became too loud to think inside of. He was standing in front of a piece in the third gallery, a small canvas, no crowd, no bench, when he heard her. "You're looking at it wrong." He turned. A woman. Black. Devastatingly beautiful, her body full and curved and completely unhurried about it. The kind of woman who had long since stopped apologizing for the space she occupied. Natural hair pinned loosely at the crown, a deep burgundy coat draped over generous shoulders that had no interest in the Seoul autumn chill. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the painting. "I'm not looking at it wrong," he said. "I'm looking at what's there." "That's exactly the problem," she said, and finally glanced at him. "You're only seeing what the painter put in front of you. You're missing everything he hid." Si-won looked back at the canvas. He did not walk away. 40 minutes later, he still had not walked away. He never got her name. He did not stop thinking about her. If you're already hooked, please subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is just getting started. Chapter 1. The Curator, Who Came Early. Seoul in October had a particular quality of light that Jane had not expected. Back in Atlanta, autumn meant the slow surrender of green to amber, trees giving up gracefully, the air going soft. Here it was sharper, the sky a cleaner blue, the light falling at angles that made even ordinary buildings look considered. She had arrived 3 days before her sister's engagement party, and had spent 2 of them exactly as she intended, alone, moving through museums at her own pace, eating meals without having to justify her order, existing without commentary. It was, she thought, the closest thing to peace she had felt in months. The National Museum had opened at 9. Jane was at the door by 5 past, coffee in hand, no map. She knew where she was going. She was a tall woman, full-figured, with deep brown skin that caught light the way good oil paintings did. Warmly, deliberately, like it had been considered. She wore a blue wrap dress that followed every curve of her body without apology, her natural hair pinned up loose at the crown. She moved through the entrance the way she moved through most rooms, chin level, steps unhurried, entirely aware of the glances and entirely unimpressed by them. She had learned a long time ago that other people's discomfort with her body was not her problem to manage. She moved through the first 2 galleries without stopping, not because they weren't worth stopping for, but because she had studied them before the flight. She was saving herself for the 3rd. The piece was smaller than she remembered from the catalog. That happened sometimes. Images flattened things, stripped the texture, made you think you already knew what you were seeing. Standing in front of it, she understood why it had stayed with her since she first came across it in a journal 6 months ago. It was a man at a gate. That was the surface of it. A figure, his back mostly turned, one hand resting on iron bars, the city behind him unclear and vast. The light came from the right. Everything about his posture said he was leaving. Except his hand. His hand was not pushing the gate open, it was just resting there. And the more Jane looked, the more she understood that he had not yet decided. She was still working out why when she heard him. The perspective is off. She didn't startle. She had felt someone approach, not intrusively, just present, but she had been too deep inside the painting to turn. She turned now, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit that sat on his frame like it had been built specifically for him. Korean, early 30s, jaw clean, features sharp in the particular way of a man who had never needed to soften himself for anyone. Handsome in a way that was almost architectural, structured, deliberate, impossible to look away from. But it was his hands that caught her first. Dark ink crawled across his knuckles, disappearing beneath his cuffs, and above his collar, the edge of a tattoo curved along the side of his neck. Something bold, something that had no interest in being hidden. A man who wore a suit worth $10,000 and tattoos like they belonged together. They did. He was frowning at the painting. "The perspective is fine," Jane said. "The gate should be further left if we are standing where the painter implies we are standing. We're not standing where the painter implies. That's the point." He shifts the viewpoint deliberately. "We're not witnesses, we're inside the man's perception. The gate appears closer because he's not ready to reach it yet." Silence. Chapter 2. The Uninvited Guest. The Lotte Gallery event was Harper's idea. Everything was Harper's idea. The engagement party in Seoul because Marcus had connections here. The guest list curated like a performance. The venue. Sleek, minimalist white walls drowning in floral arrangements that cost more than Jane's monthly rent. And because the party wasn't until Saturday, Harper had arranged an exclusive gallery preview on Thursday evening for her inner circle. "It'll be fun," Harper had said, in the tone she used when fun meant mandatory. Jane had come because declining wasn't an option. You showed up for family. That was the rule, even when family had spent the last 3 days finding new ways to remind you of your size, your singleness, your stubborn refusal to want the things Harper had decided mattered. The gallery was already full when she arrived. Seoul's moneyed class in quiet, expensive clothes, speaking in the low, assured tones of people who were never surprised by anything. Jane took a glass of wine from a passing tray, found a wall near the back, and let the art do what art always did for her. Made the rest of the room fall away. She was wearing a deep plum gown that evening, draped across her full figure like it had been poured there, her brown skin luminous against the dark fabric. More than one person looked twice. Jane did not notice, or if she did, she had filed it away somewhere unimportant. She was standing in front of a large abstract, all tension and dark color, something unresolved at its center, when Harper appeared. "You're hiding," Harper said, smiling the smile she used for audiences. "I'm looking at the painting." "Same thing." Harper touched her arm lightly. "Come. There are people I want you to meet. In a minute." Harper's smile thinned at the edges just barely. "Jane, 1 minute, Harper, a beat." Harper pivoted smoothly toward a nearby couple, already laughing at something, already belonging. Jane turned back to the painting, and that was when she saw him. Not at the entrance, not moving through the crowd. He was already still, already watching her, standing near the far wall with a glass of whiskey held loosely in one tattooed hand. The neck tattoo caught the gallery light first, then the rest of him assembled, the dark suit, the sharp jaw, the expression that gave away almost nothing. The man from the museum. For a moment, neither of them moved. The gallery carried on around them, oblivious. Jane felt the corner of her mouth move before she could stop it. He crossed the room. The crowd shifted for him without being asked, the particular parting that happened for men who had never once needed to request it. He stopped beside her, looked briefly at the abstract on the wall. "What is it lying about?" he asked. "The center," Jane said. "It wants you to think it's chaos. It isn't. Every stroke is deliberate. The artist knew exactly what he was building. Control disguised as disorder. Most interesting things are..." He looked at her then. Really looked, the way he had at the museum, like she was something worth the time it took to understand. His gaze moved over her the way a person looked at something genuinely beautiful. Unhurried, certain, without performance. Jane held it without flinching. "I don't know your name," he said. "Jane," she said. "Jane Adaze Okafor. Kang Siwon." She knew the name. Everyone in this room knew the name. Kang Group. 32 floors of glass in Gangnam, the kind of wealth that stopped needing to announce itself 3 generations ago. She kept her face still. "You didn't mention what you do," she said. "You didn't ask. I'm asking now." "I run things," he said simply. That was when she felt it, a shift in the room, a particular stillness that moved through the crowd, like a current changing direction. She turned slightly and found the source. Marcus. Harper's fiancé stood near the entrance, champagne in hand, laughing at something a guest had said. He was looking at Jane, not the way a man looked at his fiancée's sister at a family event. The way a man looked at something unresolved, something he had not finished with. Jane turned back to the painting. She had spent 4 years finishing with Marcus. She had done it quietly, completely, without drama. The way she did most difficult things. She had never told Harper, She had decided a long time ago that some truths cause damage without serving any purpose. Standing here now, in this room, with Marcus's gaze still tracking her from across the gallery, she wondered if that decision had been as clean as she had told herself it was. Before the thought could settle, Harper was back. She arrived with her perfect posture, and her recalibrated smile, and her talent for inserting herself into the exact center of whatever she had not been invited into. "C1, C." Harper's voice dropped into warmth so practiced it almost sounded real. "I didn't realize you knew my sister." "We've met," he said. He did not look at Harper. "Jane is our family academic." Harper laughed softly. "Art curator, very serious, very passionate. She could talk about paintings all night if you let her." A pause waited with sisterly affection. "I'm sure you have more important people to speak to." The room was close and quiet and listening. Jane set her wine glass down on a nearby shelf. She had done this before, stood still while Harper repackaged her into something smaller. She was very good at surviving it. "She wasn't talking," C1 said. Harper's smile held. "Sorry, she wasn't talking." He said it without heat, without edge, simply returning a fact to the air where it belonged. "I was asking her questions. There is a difference." He looked at Jane. "I have a private collection at my residence, several pieces that haven't been properly assessed in years." A pause. "I'd like a professional opinion." Jane understood what he was offering, not a date, a door, one she could walk through on her own terms, with her expertise leading. It was the most careful thing anyone had offered her in a long time. "I'm in Seoul for 5 more days," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking now." Behind him, Harper stood with her champagne and her recalibrated smile and said absolutely nothing. Jane looked at Kang Siwon. She did not look at Marcus. "Tell me about the collection," she said. Chapter 3, what she heard. She had told him she needed a moment. It wasn't untrue. The conversation had opened something in her chest. Careful, deliberate, like a window being unlatched from the inside, and she needed to stand still inside it before she said anything she hadn't decided to say yet. The gallery bathroom was cool and white and mercifully empty. Jane stood at the mirror for exactly 30 seconds, looking at herself. Full face, natural hair pinned up, the plum gown sitting beautifully against the rich brown of her skin. She looked like a woman who belonged exactly where she was. She looked like herself, which in Harper's language was the same thing as not enough. Then she unlocked the stall, walked to the sink, turned on the tap. Steady hands, steady breath. She had heard versions of this her entire life. Softer in front of their parents, sharper in private, always wrapped in the language of concern. But this one had a finality the others hadn't carried. This was not performance. This was what Harper believed. Jane turned off the tap. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. At the woman in the plum gown, at the full figure and the brown skin and the natural hair and the face that had never once been the problem it was made out to be. Then she picked up her clutch, straightened her shoulders, and walked out. Harper was near the bathroom entrance, laughing with someone. She turned when the door opened, and for one unguarded second, just one, her face showed the exact calculation Jane had always suspected was underneath. How much did she hear? "Jane." "I heard everything," Jane said. She did not stop walking. "We were just... I know what you were doing." Jane turned to face her. The hallway was quiet, the gallery noise muffled behind glass. "You were doing what you always do, making me small enough to fit somewhere that doesn't threaten you." Harper's expression shifted, wounded now, or performing wounded, and Jane had stopped being able to tell the difference years ago. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," Jane said. "You've been doing it my whole life. In front of your friends, in front of your fiancé's colleagues. Tonight, in front of a man whose opinion you decided mattered, you tried to embarrass me before I could become anything worth noticing." "I was protecting you," Harper said. "Men like him don't..." "Don't what?" Jane's voice was quiet. That was the thing about real anger. It didn't need volume. "Don't want someone like me? Say it, Harper. You've been thinking it all night. Just say it." Harper said nothing. Jane looked at her sister. At the beautiful, brittle, carefully constructed version of a woman who had needed Jane to be less for so long she had built her whole sense of herself around it. Then Jane looked at Marcus, who had appeared at the edge of the hallway, drawn by instinct or guilt or something older than either, and was standing very still, watching them both. Harper followed her gaze. The three of them stood in the quiet hallway, and for one suspended moment, something unspoken moved through the air between them, old and heavy and long overdue. Jane was the first to look away. "Enjoy your engagement party," she said quietly, and walked back toward the gallery. The main room was still humming. Music, conversation, the gentle percussion of expensive glasses. Jane moved through it steadily, chin level, steps unhurried, her full figure cutting a clean path through the crowd. Saiwon was near the far wall. He saw her before she reached him. She watched him end his conversation mid-sentence, the way you ended something when something more important had arrived. His gaze moved over her face, reading it the way he read paintings, looking for what was actually there beneath what was being shown. He did not ask what happened. "Ready to tell me about the collection?" Jane said. Something settled in his expression. Quiet and certain. "My car is outside," he said. Jane nodded once. She did not look back. If Jane just did what you think she did, drop comment. New episodes every week. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Chapter 4. The House on the Hill. The Kang residence was not what she expected, which meant it was exactly what it should have been. She had prepared herself for glass and steel, and the particular coldness of wealth that had forgotten how to be human. What she found instead was a house that sat in the hills north of the city like it had grown there, traditional in its bones, modern only where it needed to be, surrounded by the kind of deliberate quiet that money could buy but couldn't fake. The car had moved through Seoul in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, the kind that belonged to people who had already said enough for one evening and knew it. Siwon had not filled it with small talk. Jane had not asked him to. She had used the drive to let the hallway settle inside her. Marcus standing at the edge of it. Harper's face in the moment before the calculation returned. The old weight of a secret she had carried so long, it had started to feel like furniture, something she moved around without thinking, something that had simply become part of the layout of her life. She set it aside as the car climbed into the hills. Inside, the collection was spread across 3 rooms on the upper floor. No grand introduction. Siwon simply opened the first door and stepped back, and Jane walked in. She forgot about Harper within 30 seconds. The pieces were extraordinary. Not all of them. There were acquisitions in the 3rd room that had clearly been made for prestige rather than love, the kind of art that existed to be mentioned at dinners. But the 1st room had been curated by someone who understood what they were looking at. "Who chose these?" she asked. "My mother," Siwon said. He was standing near the door, jacket removed now, the full sleeve of tattoos visible on his left arm, dark, intricate work that moved from his wrist to his shoulder, traditional motifs threaded through with something more personal, more earned. He stood with the ease of a man who had never once felt the need to cover himself. Jane looked at the paintings. She knew what she was doing. She studied art history at OHA. Before she married my father, she wanted to work in conservation. Jane stopped in front of a mid-sized canvas. A woman reading, interior light, the kind of quiet domestic intimacy that took real skill to render without sentimentality. Why didn't she? A pause. The Kang family had other requirements, he said. Jane understood what he wasn't saying. She had spent her whole life watching women fold themselves into the shapes other people required. She recognized the particular grief of a talent that had been redirected before it could become anything. She moved to the next piece. And the next. Siwon followed at a distance, never crowding, asking questions when she stopped long enough to suggest she had something to say. He listened the way he had at the museum, completely, without performing it. "This one," she said, stopping before a smaller canvas near the window. A landscape. But the horizon line was wrong. Set too high, the sky compressed, the land vast and slightly suffocating. "This one's misattributed." Siwon came to stand beside her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of him, something dark and clean. "You're certain?" "The attribution says 1960s Seoul School. But look at the ground texture. That's a northern technique. Different soil, different approach to shadow. This was painted by someone who grew up looking at a different landscape than the one they're depicting." Someone displaced, Siwon said quietly. Someone painting the home they remembered, Jane said. Not the one they were standing in. The room was very still. That's a lonely reading, he said. It's an honest one. He was quiet for a moment. Then you do that. You find what the painter was actually feeling and you say it plainly. Most people soften it. Softening it doesn't make it less true. No, he said. It doesn't. He was looking at her now, not the painting. Jane kept her eyes on the canvas for exactly 2 more seconds before she turned and met his gaze. Up close, the neck tattoo was more detailed than she had first registered, bold lines that curved toward his jaw, unhidden, unashamed. There was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not the cool authority from the gallery, something quieter, something that looked almost like recognition. Your sister, he said. At the gallery. Don't. I'm not going to dissect it, he said. I only want to say, I've watched people try to make someone smaller because they're afraid of what that person is. I've seen it my whole life. In boardrooms, in family dinners. A pause. It never works. The person just gets clearer. Jane looked at him. You got clearer, he said simply. When you walked back into that room, you were the clearest thing in it. She held that for a moment, not rushing it. You barely know me, she said. I know how you look at things that matter, he said. That's not nothing. The city glittered below the window, Seoul spread wide and bright and indifferent to the two of them standing inside this quiet room full of paintings that had been waiting years for someone to look properly. Jane turned back to the misattributed landscape. The displaced painter. The remembered home. The horizon set too high. She understood it more than she had 10 minutes ago. Chapter 5. What she chose. She stayed until midnight. Not because she forgot the time. Jane always knew the time. But because the hours had the quality of something she did not want to interrupt. They had moved through all 3 rooms. She had given him honest assessments of 14 pieces, preliminary notes on 2 that required further research, and a firm opinion on the misattributed landscape she was already thinking about writing up properly. It was the most herself she had felt in years. Siwon had walked her to the car with the same unhurried certainty he carried everywhere, and at the door he paused. You said 5 days, he said. 4 now. The Liam has a private collection in storage, pieces that haven't been exhibited in a decade. I have a relationship with the director. He looked at her. If you wanted to see them. Jane was quiet for a moment. That's not a small thing to offer, she said. No, he said. It isn't. She understood him by now, she thought. He did not waste gestures. Everything he offered was considered, intentional, given with full knowledge of what it meant. He was not a man who did things halfway, and he was not a man who pretended to want less than he did. Tomorrow, she said. Noon. Something moved in his expression, settled. I'll send a car. She had gone back to the hotel and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her phone. Harper had sent 3 messages. Marcus had sent 1. She read Harper's messages once and put the phone face down. She did not open Marcus's. She sat with that for a long moment. The weight of what she had not said, the years of careful distance, the secret that had lived quietly inside her chest like a splinter she had learned to work around. She had convinced herself it was clean. She had convinced herself that silence was the same as resolution. Standing in that hallway tonight, seeing Marcus's face, she understood that it wasn't. She would have to deal with it, not tonight. But soon. She set the phone down and stood at the hotel window. Seoul in the late hours was a different city. The Han River a dark ribbon below, the lights of Gangnam blurred and beautiful through the glass. She thought about Siwon standing in that first room, jacket off, tattoos visible, watching her move through his mother's collection with the expression of a man who had brought someone to see something he loved and was waiting to find out if they saw it too. She thought about Harper's voice in the gallery bathroom. Some people build the life they deserve. Maybe, Jane thought. Maybe. But she had spent 12 years learning how painters lied, about what they wanted you to see versus what they had actually made. She knew the difference between a life that looked right from across the room and one that held something true at its center. She had been standing at her own gate for a long time, her hand on the bars, the city behind her vast and familiar. She was not sure until this week that she had been ready to push. At noon, the car arrived. Jane picked up her bag, checked the mirror once. Burgundy coat, hair pinned up, herself, full and beautiful and completely unapologetic about it, and walked out of the room. The door closed behind her. She did not look back. Jane chose herself, and she's not done yet. The Marcus secret doesn't stay buried. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to see a woman walk through her own door. Part 2 is coming.